record the second portion, as a different file. All right.
And you can use that to go from the other.
With all the special effects. There's a really annoying one, when you look at the effects. There's one called rotation. So you can rotate the image. So if you have a video clip, you can play the video and rotate it at the same time. And by default, it only rotates in one axis, but you can actually go into properties and you can rotate in all three axes. Yeah, it can be very nauseating.
You can use the newspaper thing where it just spins up.
Yeah, yep. And using the little clip thing, you can basically rotate in and then make it fix, after a certain point, and then play it and then rotate back out again.
Do the yo-yo thing.
Yeah, you can spend all day long with this tool. So back into systems analysis. Okay, we're almost done. I already created the homework for chapter 10, so it's already online.
Scratch?
Hmm?
Is it another scratch?
Oh, that's right. I need to talk about the Scratch homework.
You did not.
Was it due today?
Yes.
There was.
Oh. Oh, okay. Well, if it's due today, I can talk about it. If it's not due today, I have to wait until such time. Yes. Okay. So I think we're almost, talking about the system design part. And the interesting part is this part, it has very few pages on system design, even though this is the part that would take the longest amount of time in most information systems.
You think at least.
All right, design phase. So this is a quick summary. Identify potential solutions, evaluate solutions, select hardware and software, develop application specifications, and obtain approval to implement the new system. But this is actually the bulk of the development of a new information system. This is really the bulk of it. When it comes to building a house, it's not really quite so much. But when it comes to an information system, the design part is really the bulk of it. And it goes through, I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's a lot of stuff here that is really just reading it, on your own, you'll be fine. So I'm just going to skip to the portions, where I think it is important. This part is important. It gives you the different options. In other words, if you want to implement or design and implement a new information system, you can go all the way from prefab, so to speak, all the way to just getting 2x4s and nails and make your own house using the raw material. So that's basically the full spectrum. The question is, which one fits you best? Okay, do you have something that has a canned solution? And if you do have a canned solution, how much is the canned solution? Okay, so a lot of factors will dictate, kind of determine, how much of each portion you need to do, and you can mix it. You can mix it up too. In other words, you can use a commercial software like PeopleSoft, okay, which is kind of expensive, but it has a lot of capabilities. But of the very few things that PeopleSoft cannot do, if you understand, or if you have someone who understands how the database engine is structured, how the tables are structured, you can make your own queries as well. So you can have some little add-on modules that is separate from the product itself, and then be able to use it that way. Okay, so we'll go through a few of these items. Programming tools. This is at the lowest level. Okay, creating an information system from scratch using a programming language can take months or years. It's very costly, and it says here it offers the most flexibility. It's only from the perspective of what feature you want to put into the system. It is flexible in that way, but once it's done, it is not flexible. Okay, because you will have to manage hundreds of thousands of lines of code at least. Okay, so this approach using programming, quote unquote, programming tools is equivalent of you're trying to build a house, and you're just driving a big huge truck to Home Depot and get the 4x4s, 2x4s, the 4x8 sheets, nails and screws and stuff like that, and you're building everything from scratch, including the cabinets in the kitchen and stuff like that. Everything is built from scratch. Okay, and obviously it will take a long time, right? But it does offer you the possibility of everything is custom. Okay, if you want a custom kitchen, your cabinet needs to be of a certain height, a certain depth, and so on and so forth. if you're building everything, you can do it. You can do it any size, any shape you want. All right. So this gives you the flexibility of that. But if something breaks, what do? You cannot just buy something to replace it, right? Because everything is so custom. In order to fit, into the old space, you need the new piece to be custom made as well. So that's the problem of using only programming tools for an entire information system. Application development tools is essentially a type of software construction kit, including building blocks that can be assembled into a software product. This is the most common approach, with most organizations. I can name many different products like that, including Microsoft Office. Okay, Microsoft Office, even though we think of it as individual components like Microsoft Word for word processing, Microsoft Excel for spreadsheets, Microsoft Access for database interface, and so on and so forth, these solutions can also integrate on their own. In other words, your spreadsheet can ask Access to provide data. Okay, your word processor can import data from your spreadsheet. Okay, so when you update the database, your document will get populated with the latest data automatically. Okay, you can also write scripts. Okay, if there are certain things that you have to do frequently, and you don't want to have to click 20 times in order just to get something done, you can pre-program it. That's one, and then we also have other types of application development kits like ARCGIS. It's a GIS package, a Geographical Information System package. It includes a lot of the tools already. You don't have to start programming from the ground up, but yet at the same time, it gives you the flexibility of rearranging things and customizing things in a way that it's really flexible, and you're not starting from scratch. How would you compare the first one with the second one? The second one is almost like you buy prefab, stuff, whenever it's possible. So instead of making your own kitchen cabinets, you go to Home Depot, you go to whatever store, and you just kind of shop around, and they have pre-built ones already, and you just say, okay, I need a total width of this much. I'll just go ahead and assemble the kitchen cabinets in a certain way to basically fill up that length, and so on and so forth. Which one do you think is more costly? The first approach, using programming tools, you're building everything from scratch, or the second one, using basically prefab stuff for the most part? It depends a lot on one, how much is the commercial software, the application development tool, and two, how much is labor. Okay, and this is where some companies using the first approach, using programming tools only, will outsource their projects because it's very labor intensive. So whenever possible, you cannot outsource building your house, right? You cannot just say I'll have someone to build my house in China and then ship it here, right? It doesn't quite work that way yet. Okay? When we have teleporters, maybe we can do it that way. But with software, can we do it like that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it does open up a can of worms in that case. Now, first and foremost would be communication. If your development team is in China and you're here, what is the time difference? Does anyone know the time zone difference between here and China?
About 15 hours.
Yep, it's 16 hours, 15 to 16 depending whether we have DST or not. Okay, so that means at this point, what is their time? Plus 16. This is 2 a.m. their time. Okay, so exactly, business meetings will take a little bit of coordination. Okay, there is a certain overlap. If you're willing to wake up really early, that's a good time. Either really early here or about after afternoon 4 to 5 p.m. here. It's also a good time to have meetings, but it's difficult. Okay, it's definitely more difficult because of the time difference. How about face-to-face meetings? Sometimes face-to-face meetings are still best, especially when you want to kind of scratch up something on a piece of paper, talk to people in person and stuff like that. That's going to be a little bit difficult. You can use Skype and some other types of online video conferencing tools. It will help a little bit, But it's still not the same as actually sitting on the table, at the same table and talking to about technical stuff. Yep.
Well, also Skype doesn't work from calling from the US to China.
Skype may not work, but I know as a fact that Google Voice does.
Yeah. But Skype doesn't work. Because last time one of my friends went down to China and it didn't work at all.
Yeah, Google Voice worked because my wife had a tour in China in the summer, and I was using Google Voice to call her up from my cell phone, and it was pretty easy and it was clear. It was the quality. I was surprised by the quality of the sound of the voice. And with Google Voice, you can also open up the video part of it too, so you can actually have a video conferencing with using Google Voice. What about language? There'll be a certain barrier as well. Okay, if you do business in China, you have to make sure that the other party can understand English, or the other way around. You have someone on staff who can also speak Mandarin, so that person can act as a bridge between the two teams. So definitely there are some hidden costs involved when companies outsource. What about legal stuff when you outsource? In other words, let's just say that you contract out to a company in China, and it's nobody's fault. Okay, they understood the project to be like this, and you actually meant the project to be like that. Okay, so there's a misunderstanding somewhere. Okay, so they deliver the product. It's not exactly what you want. What are you going to do about it? Can you sue them? You can try. But since it's in a different country, it's pretty hard to arbitrate and and resolve resolve all the issues. Exactly. So there are a lot of hidden costs involved. Now with application development tools, you also have some kind of a lot of hidden costs as well. The hidden cost with application development tools is, what if you use version 4 to develop your application, your information system, and version 5 just comes out? What do you do?
Updating.
Well, you can choose to upgrade or you can choose not to upgrade. Either way, there's a cost involved. Now, when you upgrade, there's a cost of, well, guess what? Upgrading, right? Because you're upgrading to a new version. But that's not the only cost. It depends also on the development tool. Some development tools like VBA has a long history of backward incompatibility. In other words, you write your code, you customize the package for version 4, version 5 comes out, nothing works. And you have to spend a lot of time to spot everything that is not working and then fix it. So it's not just the hidden cost of upgrading the software, it's also the cost of making sure that the new version is compatible with what you have already. What if you choose not to upgrade? Well, but the system is serving you well. Okay, it's doing what it is supposed to, and it's doing it in a way that fulfills all your needs. I mean, you're good with it. All the requirements are met. What is the hidden cost of not upgrading? So you're at version 4, you're not upgrading to version 5. Version 6 comes out, you're not upgrading. Version 7 comes out, you're not upgrading. Suddenly, when it comes out with version 8, at some point the vendor will stop supporting older versions. What does that mean?
You have to.
But what is the implication? Because remember, version 4 is already good enough for you anyway, so why would you want to upgrade it even though the vendor stops supporting it? What is supporting? Supporting means they will keep updating the software, but why do you need to update to version 4? There are two main reasons. One, bug fixes. Okay, in other words, version 4 may have some bugs and some features may not work the way they are supposed to. But since you're already happy with version 4, it must mean that all those bugs are not affecting you. What is the second reason why you need to update your software? Viruses, security. Okay, now that is a big thing, because just because when you use it correctly, it works correctly, doesn't mean there's no security flaw. Security flaw usually comes in the form of, what if someone intentionally uses it in a way that it is not designed for, right? So the fact that it is working well within your organization, the way it is intended, has no implication whatsoever of how secure the software is. So when the vendor quote unquote stop supporting version 4, what that means is when they find new security holes, they will not plug it. Okay? And nonetheless, the security holes will be published. So that means hackers now can easily hack into your system because now they have a list of all the security holes, and two, you're running an old version that does not have all the security patches. Okay, so you cannot fall behind too much. So let's say by version 8, you realize that you have to upgrade, but by that time your upgrade will be very costly because you are skipping 4 versions. Has anyone tried to upgrade from Windows XP to Windows 7? Cannot be done. Can be done?
You have to do a fresh copy. You can't upgrade it.
Exactly. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like from Vista to 7.
Yeah. If you have Vista to 7, it takes about 40 minutes to port it over.
Exactly.
But if you skip it and just go straight to 7, you have to delete or back up your XP and then reload 7 first.
Okay. Do you have to buy a full license, or can you still upgrade?
You have to buy the full license. You can't get the upgrade.
Well, there you go. So it's a little bit more costly. But if you what if you want to upgrade from NT 4.0 to Windows 7? Forget it, right? Just copy the data files and you're done.
Yeah.
You cannot just upgrade everything. So that means when you are using the second model, using application development tools, you are more sensitive to upgrades and updates from the vendor. When the vendor says oh, there's a new version, you really have to think about, well, should I stay behind, or should I move with the development tools? The third option, I really hate this part because it doesn't refresh the page correctly. The third option is called commercial software. Commercial software for an information system is usually a series of pre-programmed software modules supplied by a VAR, which is value-added reseller. Now this one, it eliminates most of the design work. I think PeopleSoft falls into this category. It basically comes pre-canned. Okay, there's no programming involved anymore. It is just customization. In other words, the invoicing software module is already here. It's already fully done. It's already fully integrated with the rest of the system. What you need to do as an organization is simply to supply the company name, new address, logo, and all the other stuff that you need to do to customize it for your own organization. But there's really no programming whatsoever involved anymore. If so, there's only very little programming involved.
So is Scratch an example of application development tools over commercial software?
Well, Scratch, I would say, it still falls into the first category because it doesn't really supply much to you. It has some sample stuff, some WAV files, some existing sprites and stuff like that, but it doesn't provide any type of canned pre-programmed module. When it comes to programming, you're still building everything from scratch. It is just the artwork and the music that comes, that some of those is included. So I would say Scratch is still in the first category and not quite in the second. The third category requires even less programming, if anything at all. So you're also more relying on the vendor now. So you're shifting a lot. You're giving up a lot of the independence for convenience. Okay, you're basically saying I can trust the vendor, I can trust the VAR, I can trust the publisher of the software that they know what they're doing, and I can just use the product. In other words, in the third option here, you are basically just saying, okay, I want this house in the catalog, and I want someone to basically drive a big semi or several semi trucks to move all the pieces over and just assemble on site and that becomes your house. You don't get to choose what type of cabinet you want to use, maybe just rephasing, and you can choose some of the material, but for the most part the floor plan is fixed. It is not exactly the floor plan that you want. You have to pick one of the floor plans that are already in the database. The last one is called a turnkey system. A turnkey system is the most expensive one because you're basically just letting your consultant or another agency to take care of the design phase of your information system. It's just like, okay, here's a truckload of money, make my information system happen. Okay, that's the last option. It has a lot of risk factor involved. The last option requires the most experience in terms of project management and experienced people on your end as the client to help manage and monitor the other side. Because otherwise you can spend millions and millions of dollars and get nothing in return. Just ask the DMV. Right? Yeah, the last one, with a turnkey system, you really need to know, what you're doing. Someone in your organization has to keep an eye on the entire project all the time and have constant communication with the other side, just to make sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to. So we can also see from the pictures here, turnkey system. It says minimal effort required to select and set up equipment and software, because you're leaving it up to the other side to decide it, but it requires time and expertise to evaluate, because it's mostly done on the other side. So do you know what they're doing? And are they doing what you want them to do? Are there any questions involved in these 4 different approaches? Questions? Okay, evaluation and selection. How does the team choose the best solution? Well, what do you think? Cost is one. Okay, most companies, especially, well, it's not even just for-profit organizations, even non-profit organizations. Cost effectiveness is important, because they can save their money for what they really are about. Okay, like Happy Tails, they want to rescue cats. So if they can save money in their information system, they have more money to buy cat food and cat litter, right? So that means cost is one important factor, but cost is also separated into multiple different types of costs. The cost that we are all familiar with is money. Okay, so it's just how much do I spend to get the system up and running. But there are other types of costs too. There's also risks involved when you're designing an information system. So it says here that you have to have a list of criteria to evaluate an information system related to cost, benefit, and development time. I would say development time is actually a part of the cost too, because it is a cost of opportunity. If your information system can come online earlier, then you will be able to capture more of the market that the information system can help you capture. So it's still really just cost. And this part depends on a lot of different factors, like how fast the organization is growing. If you have a really fast growing organization, your evaluation criteria will be very different from an organization that is well established and is not expecting any quick changes. Does that make sense? Okay. If you're a government agency, let's say the franchise tax board, do you think you'll be seeing a lot of growth? Or do you think your growth can be unpredictable for the next 10 years?
Predictable.
It's extremely predictable. Okay, they have a lot of economics models that can model population growth, business growth, and so on and so forth. So in that case, having a system that has a lot of room to grow may not be a top priority. It's not a valued priority. To a different organization that is growing really fast, can someone give me an example of an organization that can be growing really fast? Apple, or any type of gaming industry, any gaming company, especially one that is a new company in the block, and it has a product that many people like to use. Okay, so they have a lot of potential to grow really rapidly. So with that organization, stability is not really the only point. They want the system to be stable, but at the same time, they also want it to be scalable. Okay, can we grow twice every year for the next 5 years, and the system can still handle it? That becomes a criteria for a gaming company. So the selection of these criteria depends a lot on the organization. It's not really just we need to hit this entire list of criteria and we are all good. It is it depends on the organization. How does the project team find the right hardware and software for the new information system? So once again, it depends on the organization. The interesting part is the right hardware is actually getting most of this stuff, especially for information systems, is getting virtualized. Okay, it depends on the organization. Some people say that, well, with the government we cannot use the cloud. That is not entirely true. The government cannot use a cloud that is public, but they can still have their own cloud. So your information system, once it is virtualized and live inside a cloud environment, the hardware factor is not as important as before anymore. Before, when everything is hardware-based and not virtualized, selecting the right hardware to begin with is a big deal. Because you don't want to populate an entire floor of a building with hardware that will obsolete in 2 years. Okay? Because it's just a lot of trouble to move everything in, out, and then you need to shut down the entire system for a few days, rewire the whole place, for the new system, and so on and so forth. The cost of changing hardware, to upgrade your hardware in the past is really bad. But what about virtualization? Why do you think that will help in terms of selecting the right hardware? What if your system requires, well, we haven't really talked about parallel computing and cluster-based computing, but with these days, you can run the same application. Let's say Oracle database. Okay, you can run Oracle database. When your organization is small, you can dedicate maybe 5 computers to the cluster. Okay, and it will give you sufficient performance. When your organization, when the demand increases, you can now say, oh, I need 20 computers in the cluster to keep up with the demand. Okay, but doesn't that mean that you need to install new hardware, new computers, and stuff like that to meet the demand? Not if you're in the cloud. If you're in the cloud, you basically are contracting your hardware stuff to a different organization. So it's just a matter of allocating more resources from the data center to your application. Okay? And it makes sense, for large organizations like the state of California or the federal government to have one huge data center that has the virtual servers for all of the different agencies and organizations. Because this way, you have one single organization that is responsible to maintain the hardware, to add new hardware, and so on and so forth. And all the other departments do not have to worry about hardware anymore. So more and more, depending on the size of the organization and also the information system, you will finding quote unquote the right hardware is no longer a really big issue because with virtualization, you can just allocate more resources on the fly. Yep.
I was just thinking, when they have the huge server arrays for the cloud, how do they upgrade those?
They don't upgrade the entire thing at a time. They don't just shut down the entire data center and then move everything out and move new stuff in. They can do it gradually, because what they can do, maybe not one at a time, but you can do it at least maybe 1/10 or 10% of the data center at a time. It has to do with the ability to shift the applications from the servers that you have to shut down to upgrade to the ones that are still running. So you can basically shut down 1/10 or 1/10% of the data center, upgrade the 10%, and then move applications back into those, and then shut down the next 10% and so on. So you can make changes gradually. And that's something that did not exist before. You could not do something like that. This back in the mainframe days, you have to shut down the entire mainframe, which is an entire floor of a building, in some cases, and then move everything out and then move everything in, and you have a downtime of at least a few days because of that. Okay. So we are running out of time today. I'll see you guys after the break. Have a nice Thanksgiving, and I'll see you on next Tuesday.
I was wondering if I can take a test with their next class. If I can take their exam.
Yeah, sure you can.
Okay.
Yeah, just stay here.
Okay.
On my Mac computer crash or something, it says kernel trap. What is it supposed to do?